Howdy, folks. Welcome to another episode of The Inciting Incident. I'm your host, Tim Shields. Today's guest is Garrett Stevens, chairman of Hemi-Sync, the pioneering auto technology company founded by Robert Monroe. A former Wall Street investor with a degree from Wharton, Garrett left the world of finance to explore the frontier of consciousness. He now leads Hemi-Sync's mission to help people access expanded states of awareness through sound. Garrett's work blends science, psychology, and spiritual insight and is rooted in the powerful belief that consciousness is primary and reality begins within. How's it going, Garrett?
Doing well. Thanks, Tim. Pleasure to be here.
Welcome back from vacation.
Thank you. Yeah.
Let's see if we can do this round two this time. We had a little technical difficulties last time. So you have a very unique path from Wall Street to consciousness. I can't imagine that there's too many people that have done that. So it'll be interesting to hear your response to this question I usually start with, which is, who were you, where were you, and did you have any idea what you wanted to do with your life at 17 years old?
So at 17, I was heading off to college. I grew up in a house of esoteric books. And so I was reading, Gurdjieff, Krishnamurti, Idris Shah, folks like that from a pretty young age. And I can remember at around that time picking up one of Krishnamurti's books, and he talked a lot about conditioning, the role in education and work, parenting, the way you're raised, culture, the role that all those things play in basically creating your personality. And how at the root of it is basically meaninglessness. And so I think at around that time, I kind of started to see life, the world, as kind of this big game, right? And it's kind of seemed like a bullshit game. And so I sort of thought, maybe I don't want to do this, right? Either don't want to do this, or I want to win this stupid game, whatever that meant. And at 17, I didn't have real clear ideas about what that meant or what it was going to look like. But I kind of decided that, I wanted to have liberation. I didn't want to be stuck working for someone that I didn't like, working a job that I didn't like, living hand to mouth. And so, either you accomplish that by, making your needs very low, very simple, or you secure enough resources so that you can meet your needs comfortably. And so it's kind of, again, back to the dropout or win the game choice. And I decided that I was going to try to win the game. So that was sort of why I went to Wharton. I wanted to go to Wall Street and, make enough money at a young enough age so that I could get off the treadmill.
And did you, just real quick, did you tell me that you were entertaining becoming a monk?
Yeah. So I think in a previous conversation, I talked about that. The problem with becoming a monk is I didn't know what kind of monk. And if you do that, it's easy to, again, slip into dogma, which was just, another version of the type of conditioning that, Krishnamurti was railing against, or not railing against, that's the wrong word, but, it was something else that he was pointing to. And so I didn't really know where I would go or what I would study if I was going to become a monk. Whereas the other route, I had an option, right? So that was kind of that was why I chose the path that I chose.
And how does somebody who has the idea of being a monk in their consciousness fit into Wall Street? So human beings are interesting, right? We kind of take ourselves as this I, the solid thing that is immutable and that is well understood. And I don't think that's the case for most of us, or really for any of us. And so, the same is true of me. Within me, there are different I's. And some of these I's fit pretty well into that mold. I'm very competitive. I'm very analytical. And so those things, I think, served me well on that path. And so I stayed on the Wall Street path for
17 years. So I did a 2-year investment banking stint at a company called Donaldson, Lufkin and Jenrette, which is now part of Credit Suisse. And then I briefly took a .com turn. I'm kind of dating myself now.
I was there at the tail end.
Okay, yeah. Well, same, yeah. I think I was like the company I was at. We were at the printer, which is where you go like right before you go public in like March of 2000, and like the market blew up like the very next month. So after that, it was time to go and get a real job again. And so I spent about I think 12 and a half years working for a mid-sized hedge fund here in Los Angeles. And like at around the time my father passed, which was 2009, I started to see that, this was that I might not have as much time as I thought I did. My dad passed at 65. So I was 33 when that happened. So I thought, I might be over halfway done. Like I need to start getting on with this. And as I started having that realization, life circumstances started to converge to a point where that decision became forced. So at around the same time, 2009, 2010, I began to develop this interest in out-of-body experience. And it was, again, connected to my father's passing. We did not leave on good terms. We had a big falling out. This was kind of right after the global financial crisis or during, depending on kind of how you count. And so he had, basically this big financial mess that I had to bail him out of and fix. And it strained our relationship. And so we, had this falling out, and then he died. So not great. Yeah, definitely not how I wanted it to end. And he died suddenly too. So like there was no bargaining. There's no transition. But in the immediate aftermath of his passing, I had this sense, this knowing that he was still nearby. Like I could kind of sense his presence. And also that I could go see him. And I didn't really know what that meant either. But this is back in the early days of the Joe Rogan podcast, where like he mostly talked about going to flotation tanks a lot. He would get high and then go to flotation tanks. And so he would talk about these crazy experiences, and he had these float tanks. And I thought, that sounds interesting. And so, I worked in Santa Monica, and I worked like East Coast market hours. And, I did a little Googling, and I saw that there was a float tank center in Venice Beach. So one day after work, I went over to the float tank. So I was in there for like an hour and a half. And it was, and for people that don't know, so like a flotation tank is basically a sensory deprivation chamber. There's basically 2,000 pounds, I think, 1,000 pounds of Epsom salt that's dissolved in the water. The water is heated to like 90 degrees. It's totally pitch black. You wear these goggles to keep the salt water out of your eyes. And you float in the water, but the water kind of comes up to right past your ear level.
Wow.
And so you don't really have any senses. And so you start to lose your sense of physical boundaries. You're not quite sure where your body ends and where the water begins. And so after about an hour and a half of this, it was very relaxing. I liked it. But I thought, all right, well, like nothing is really happening. It's time for me to go. And so as I started to get up to go, I realized that I was having trouble moving. I was basically paralyzed. Like my body had fallen asleep. I was still awake, but my body had fallen asleep. And then these vibrations started, and they started in my chest. And then they spread to, I think it was my belly, and then up to my head. And then my whole body was vibrating. And the next thing I knew, I was kind of shooting out the top of my head and traveling through what felt like a vortex or a wormhole. At a very high rate of speed, not sure where, but just like far away from wherever I was. And as I was going through this tunnel, like there were all these like lights, and it was beautiful and spectacular, and it was real. Like it felt more real than me sitting here right now. Like I don't know if that makes sense exactly, but as you go into all these, okay. So as you go in altered states of consciousness, like a lot of things don't translate that well. So we just kind of use words and they're not a perfect match or fit in describing what we're experiencing, but we do the best we can. And so as this was happening, at first I was blown away. I was awestruck. But then I had this thought, like, wait a second, like, am I dying right now? Because like these vibrations started in my chest, right? And my dad died of a heart attack. And so I'm thinking, did I just have a heart attack? Like, I wanted to go see my dad, but like not this way, like not in the same way that, he went. And as soon as that fear factor kicked in, it was like, wham, I was back in my body. And so then I was alert and I could kind of start to move my limbs slowly but surely. And so I made my way out of the tank. And after I showered up and like left, and I kind of met the attendant outside, the dude's name, I think it was Crash, but the guy was
perfect,
classic, like Venice Beach burnout.
Yeah.
Like I was telling him about the experience. He goes, oh man, you had an OBE, that's an out of body experience, man. And you fucked it up. You got to come back and do it again. So I did. I went back a couple more times, but it didn't go quite the same way. So like no OBE. I mean, it was a nice experience, but there was no OBE.
Yeah. So out of body experience for people who don't know what that means. Yeah.
Out of body experience, OBE. And so I became interested in trying to replicate this. And as I researched how to do it, there were two names that kept coming up. One was Robert Monroe, who was actually credited with coining the term out-of-body experience. He wrote 3 books on the subject. He founded Monroe Institute, and he created Hemi-Sync, which is the company that I now own and operate. But back then, like this was all new information to me. But as I was reading about Bob Monroe, and I was looking at like the Hemi-Sync logo, it rang a bell for me. Like I remembered seeing Hemi-Sync twice before. The first time was on these cross-country flights that I would take to go back and forth to college. Like they would advertise in the in-flight magazine on United. And so
really?
Yeah. And so they would have these ads, like they would have like the picture of the neuromapper. And so it'd show like the one brainwave map where like your brainwaves are incoherent. Then it shows your brainwaves on Hemi-Sync and they're coherent. And I forgot what the ad copy was, but it was something like, reach your full human potential and, like concentrate better and sleep better and relax. I think it alluded to more esoteric pursuits as well. But, I can remember being intrigued by that, thinking, I wonder if that actually works. And then the second time I can remember seeing it was maybe around 2000, 2002, sometime around then when I was home for Christmas. And my dad had the full Gateway Experience compact disc set, like all 6 or 7.
I was about to. I wrote down here Gateway process. So
right,
yeah. Continue and then tell people what that is.
Yeah. So that was my first experience, or the first time I came into contact with the Gateway Experience program. And like I think his first CD was unwrapped. The rest were still shrink wrapped. And he was like, and like I told him, I said, I've seen this before. I can remember seeing this in, the in-flight magazine on United. He's like, yeah, those are cool. You should check them out while you're here. But I didn't. But I remembered that in researching Robert Monroe, up in like 2010 now. And so as I remembered that, I thought, I wonder if I have those, because after my dad passed, I basically inherited all his stuff. They were sitting in boxes in my garage. And so I went out to the garage and started digging through the boxes. So like all those esoteric books that like filled the house and that I was reading as a kid, they were now in my garage. And I opened one box. This would be the third or fourth box I opened. And sure enough, there were the Gateway Experience CDs and all 3 of Bob's books. And I thought, wow, this is quite a synchronicity. And so I started going through them. And, the other names that came up when I was researching out-of-body experience around that time were William Buhlman, who had just started giving an OBE workshop at Monroe Institute at around that time. as well as Robert Bruce, who is an Australian man who passed recently, and wrote the book Astral Dynamics, and is well known for working with the energy body, which a lot of people think is a good precursor to trying to master the out-of-body experience. And so I started doing all these exercises and getting pretty into it. And then, so I actually went to the Institute to take William Buhlman's course in 2010. I took Gateway Voyage the following year. And so Gateway Voyage is basically a series of exercises that are designed to help the practitioner access extraordinary states of consciousness using a proprietary binaural beat technology called Hemi-Sync. And so for those of you that don't know what a binaural beat is, it's like you have one signal in your left ear, so called 100 hertz, and the second signal in your right ear, called 107 hertz. Your brain automatically makes a third signal that is not on the recording, which is the difference between those two frequencies. So in the case of 100 hertz and 107 hertz, your brain would make a 7 hertz binaural beat. And that can be very useful because the adult human brain generally does not hear or process anything under about 20 hertz. And there are a lot of useful brainwave states beneath 20 hertz, which can be difficult to access without some help. So from, say, half a hertz to 4 hertz, that's delta. So that'd be like a sleep state. From 4 to 8 hertz, that's theta. That's sort of borderland liminal state between sleep and waking. From 8 to about 14 hertz is alpha. So that's a state of relaxation. Then above 14 hertz is beta. And then once you start getting into high beta, which I can't remember what the cutoff for high beta is, but high beta tends to be somewhat negative. And a lot of us are always in high beta. If you're multitasking, working, juggling a lot of things at once, you're probably in high beta. That means you're stressed. Your sympathetic nervous system is probably in overdrive, injecting your body with a lot of cortisol and adrenaline. It can be hard to come down from that. And so binaural beats can be useful for accessing all these various brainwave states. And so getting back to the Gateway experience.
Which came out of the CIA, by the way, right?
It did not come out of the CIA, but the CIA became interested in it. And this will take me into that.
Yeah.
So let's see how to begin. So the Gateway experience, it can be used to access various extraordinary states of consciousness, from mind awake body sleep states, which is a good precursor state, like a trance state, basically, for out-of-body experience. States of expanded consciousness, states where you might experience no time, all the way to potentially transcending space-time itself. And so this can be used for a lot of esoteric pursuits, including remote viewing, which is basically accessing information outside of space-time. And so that is why the Department of Army Intelligence became interested in the Gateway process. And they famously wrote a 27-page report about it in 1983. It was classified in, I think, 2003. And it repeatedly goes viral on social media over and over again. And so that is how a lot of people find us.
Wow.
Yeah.
I just want to put something out there. So your inciting incident, we could say, was your dad passing away, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, that was certainly one of them. I think I've kind of had a series of inciting incidents over the years, where, maybe I kind of feel myself falling apart, and like I don't know if I'm going to make it, or kind of like what I'm going to feel like on the other side, or like how it's going to be, like how I'm going to experience myself in the world. And then I go through it, and like I'm still here.
Yeah. And you're expanded as a result.
I'm sorry?
You're expanded as a result.
Yeah. I'm different when I come out of them. But yeah, that incident of my dad dying at 33 was probably the biggest one.
Yeah. And it's also interesting that, in the new work, dream tethering, it's like you throw something out there, and then if you stay locked into it, and sometimes you don't even have to be locked into it, but it's like such a powerful imprint on the field. When you pursue that, the path starts to reveal itself. Jay Krishnamurti said it's a pathless path. So when you're, following this or dream tethering or whatever, it's like you don't know how you're going to get there. But if you are in that forward momentum, the universe is going to, sort of guide you along the way if you're awake and paying attention. And then, of course, here you are doing these, expanded, states of awareness things. So you're probably locking into it even more.
Yeah. No, that's interesting. So you're familiar with Jay Krishnamurti?
A little bit. Yeah. I mean, I always think of the pathless path because that's what I'm living as an artist and writer. So, but yeah, I mean, I'm not super familiar with him, but I definitely know a little bit about him, and definitely a fountain of wisdom, that guy.
Mm-hmm.
So, so where do you, I didn't mean to cut you off, but so
no, I went on a tangent there. So
no, I love it. I mean, I think it's
that's the original question. Yeah,
I think it's so fascinating. Like I love, I mean, part of the reason why I did this podcast is because I love hearing the human stories behind the people. And there's just this kind of mystical and magical thread that weaves throughout your story, as far as I'm hearing. So how do you go from, so you're in this exploratory state, right? So then where do you go from there?
So I think that the next phase for me after that, so like I started having all of these transcendent experiences, right? You like might even call them enlightenment type experiences, where like I thought, oh, like this is it, like I've got it now. But then I would come back, it's kind of ordinary consciousness, and realizing that I was not enlightened. I was not realized. Like my consciousness still felt pretty ordinary. Like I still was falling into like the same patterns, the same habits. And so I think the next step for me was realizing that, I still had all this conditioning that I had to work with. Like just because you've transcended your conditioning temporarily, like doesn't mean that you've fully processed it or unpacked it or transmuted it. And so that became the next step for me. And so I spent 11 years in a practice called Diamond Approach, which was created by Hamid Ali, who writes under the pen name A.H. Almas. He has a number of books that are out there that people can access freely and readily. They can be dense reads, but they're really excellent books. And so Diamond Approach, it blends a lot of different modalities, including Sufism. So kind of going back to like Idris Shah stuff I read as a kid, as well as Gurdjieff, which kind of, he founded work schools, this idea of, people coming together in like a work environment to work through their ordinary, mundane conditioning together, as well as psychology, transpersonal psychology, and various wisdom traditions, including, Advaita Vedanta or Dzogchen. And he kind of integrated it all into this system is not the right word, but into this body of wisdom teaching. Yeah. Where you kind of systematically work through your conditioning. And through that, you can have various types of realization. And like, I don't think there is like an endpoint to any of it. Like, I think realization can go on and on endlessly.
Yeah, but it's a never-ending fractal.
Yeah. And so I think the short answer to your question, though, is embodiment kind of becomes the next step after exploration. Like, how do you carry it into the world? Like, how do you show up, both for yourself and for others? To what extent do you stay present through it?
Yeah. There was something that I wanted to remember to point out. When you were in the float tank and I've been in those kind of states before. The moment you bring a human thought process to the experience, it's like you turn off the faucet.
Yes.
And then you're chasing the dragon.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So, what, how do you get to become the chairman of Hemi-Sync?
So that was, like a whole kind of serendipitous series of events. So,
not surprising.
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess kind of backing up to my finance career. So
yeah.
Spent a long time analyzing businesses, trying to figure out like what created value, like what made them durable, what made them grow, what made them valuable, how do you value them, how do you combine them, merge them to unlock value, which does not have a lot of obvious direct application to spiritual pursuit. But again, I kind of went through this transitional phase, I guess. And so I took William Buellman's out-of-body course at Monroe Institute in 2010. I took Gateway Voyage the following year. I became a trainer in 2015, took a number of other courses. And so in doing all that, I got to know Bob Monroe's kids, who had inherited the business from Bob. And so there were two things. There's kind of the institute, and then there was this other business where Bob Monroe put his intellectual property, and like that was actually what he kept and what he passed on to his kids. And so at around 2016, it became apparent that it was available for sale, and I might have a line on it. And so I threw my hat in the ring, and I know there were some other people circling it. I'm not sure why they ultimately picked me as the buyer, but I'm glad I did. And so I acquired it in 2017. And, at that time, it was still like an 80% compact disc business, which is pretty crazy in 2017. Yeah. And so I set about rebranding it, digitizing it, rebuilding the website, building an app, trying to get other wisdom carriers to work with us to create product that could better serve humanity. And it's been great. I mean, it's been fulfilling work. We've been able to turn it around. And I still think we're just scratching the surface. It's still just the beginning.
Yeah. Well, I mean, of course, we don't know who was circling the buy, but you've certainly been on a mystic's path, I would say. And I would imagine that they would want somebody to carry on that legacy. And obviously you're bringing, youth to something that was in compact discs and everything else. Mm-hmm. So you're updating it for the next generation.
Yep.
And you're mission focused.
I am. Yeah. And, I think it was a good lesson for me in the benefit of, following your own path. And, it can be scary because when you're following your own path, like we're all unique, right? And so the path that's right for each of us is probably going to be unique, which means other people haven't gone down it. And like that can be scary. I think what I found is that, I'm not the best finance guy in the world. I'm probably not the best meditator in the world. But I brought like a unique set of things, of capacities that I was pretty good at. And when you kind of stack them all together, like it might just be that I was uniquely qualified or well suited to this particular pursuit, which was right for me. But again, like I'm not necessarily world class in any one of the individual skills that was required, but putting them all together in a single package is kind of what was special about it. And what made it work for me.
Yeah. I talk about in the new book, the soul ache. And well, first of all, I want to ask before I say anything else, what does that mean anything to you? And would you say you had this soul ache that was kind of pushing you into this other realm?
Soul ache?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Because like when your work or your life activity more generally does not align with your inner purpose, there's an ache. Like there's a longing. There might even be, a sensation of pain that you have to respond to. Because if you don't, like your higher self knows that something is amiss, right? And it's going to give you reminders of that. And at first, like they'll be gentle, subtle, and then they become like more blunt. And eventually it'll get to a point where you might find yourself in crisis and like the decision is forced. So I don't know. You can tell me if.
Well, I mean, you nailed it right there. I mean, I think the soul ache is a catalyst, but the more you suppress it, again, you eventually lead to crisis, and you can either listen to that and change direction, or you can keep going down this path and life is going to get harder. But beneath the soul ache is the calling. And I think that one of the greatest sources of anxiety and depression and everything else in society is that people are not following the calling. They're not listening to that soul ache, so they're not following the calling.
Yeah.
And then they're stuck in something that's just this loop, perhaps meaningless loop is kind of a strong term, but meaningless to their sole purpose.
Yeah. That's interesting. I do feel like people are starting to wake up to that, though. And again, like it's being forced. It's being forced because the system has kind of stopped working. Like when we were coming up, how many times did you hear, go to school, get good grades, go to good college, get a good job? And like, I don't know that works that well anymore. So like now I see these influencers who are like in their 20s and like, they're coming out of these corporate jobs. And, instead of kind of the get good grades, go to good college, get a good job sort of mantra, which kind of became tired, there's this new wired version of that, which is like become homeless. Like try becoming homeless. Like don't buy a house, don't buy a lease. Like you can live in like 90% of the world for like not very much money. Like just try that. Like don't go work like a soul sucking job that you hate going to every day and that causes you like a shit ton of stress, and like there's really probably not going to be a good way out of it anytime soon. So I mean it's tough coming up as a young person these days. But like things are changing, they're shifting.
So let me ask you this then. So in your view, how does Hemi-Sync and all this stuff is heavily entwined with neuroscience and stuff. So how does neuroscience intersect with mysticism?
So just kind of along the same tangent, I think it's remarkable how many people don't even know how to relax. So earlier I was talking about, how most of us are always in high beta, right? And so like that's where your sympathetic nervous system is very active. And from that type A, outwardly successful persona or mindset, it like relaxing might feel like watching some TV, like having a drink, like going out for dinner. And like, that probably is some level of relaxation, but it's not deep relaxation where your parasympathetic rest and digest is really kicking in. And I think the thing that I'm most struck by when people first try Hemi-Sync and they really experience a deeply relaxed state or like a mind awake, body asleep state, they're blown away by the level of relaxation that is possible. And that is kind of the gateway. Like it's deeply restorative, and you start to realize, what's possible, and that the way you've been living your day to day is something akin to lunacy.
Yeah. And it also, I mean, it allows the nervous system to receive new information.
Yes.
Because if you're just in high stress all the time,
yes.
The nervous system is like locked down, and the nervous system is what allows us to plug into this 3D reality.
Yes. And there's all kinds of ways of receiving information beyond your 5 physical senses.
Yeah. Obviously, meditation is a big one. I always talk about, like, most of this book came through in this canyon, near this desert canyon where I live. And right. I should probably try Hemi-Sync. It would probably accelerate it even more, but I just put on my headphones and I get lost in either something melodic or a beat or improvisational. Yeah. And before I go for the walk, I just ask myself, the problem or the communication challenge I'm having. And 100% of the time I get an answer. That's kind of one of my processes for, writing. And then I was actually talking to Alan Steinfeld yesterday, and, it's like when you're in that trance state, you are accessing information outside of the senses. And that is the creative process. The creative process happens outside of time. And then inside of time is the craft, and, bringing that information and then making it, at least in writing, communicable and all that stuff. But I mean, I don't think people realize how much information you can receive when you shut down the senses and you just are in the present moment.
Yeah. You're basically describing gnosis.
Yeah. Yeah. The Greek word for knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And this idea that there is this body of knowledge that is just out there, maybe in archetype, that is accessible. When you learn how to access it, it opens up a whole new world.
Yeah. So, you've said consciousness is primary. I believe it as well. I mean, no, I know it, gnosis. But so in your view, how close are we to a mainstream understanding that consciousness exists outside of the brain?
That's an interesting question. So in terms of proving it, like, I think it's proven. Like, you don't need more data. Like, if you go read, like, any one of Dean Radin's books, like, he's basically proven. Like, from a scientific perspective, the only criticism you can really levy against the body of knowledge or against the data that he's assembled is that the effect, like, and I'm talking about psi phenomenon here, the effect is often small, and you cannot determine the mechanism by which the psi phenomenon happens. Okay.
And define psi phenomena.
So basically, the ability to, the existence of psi phenomenon basically points directly to the reality that consciousness is what is fundamental, is a fundamental, not physical matter. So that can include remote viewing. It can include influencing random number generators with, thought. It's basically mind over matter. So experiments that point to the existence of mind over matter phenomenon. And so the mainstream scientific materialist criticism of these studies is that the effect that's measured is often small, and the mechanism is not determined. Like, how does this happen? Like the first time, Trump won the presidency in 2016, like, there was this phenomenon where, like, a number of, like, quantum random number generators, like, went off random all of a sudden. And, like, it's happened at, like, other points in time where there was, like, this mass kind of event that everybody became aware of, like, all at the same time. Like
9/11.
Yeah. So, that'd be another example. And so, like, this stuff happens, we don't know how it happens. And like that becomes the criticism of the consciousness is what is fundamental theory.
Which is such a ridiculous argument.
Yes,
it doesn't exist because we don't understand it.
Yeah, and like we don't know how gravity works, right? But like everyone accepts that, if I like throw this up in the air, like, that's going to come down. Like that's gravity.
Yeah.
And so, you don't need more data. And so what will it take? I don't know. Like I do think it's going to become the conventional wisdom within our lifetime. And I mean, we don't know how long we're going to live, but in like given like a normal lifespan, like I think it'll happen during our lifetime.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, consciousness is a wave, and the wave is the mechanism for the transference of energy. And if enough people awaken, it's going to be like that 100th monkey, experiment or something like that. So I feel it too. And I mean, it seems like, you look at the news or doom scroll and everything's falling apart, but these systems do have to fall apart for something new to emerge.
That's right.
I'm
it
super
might not
positive.
Be falling apart in the way that we had hoped or wanted, but they're falling apart.
That's undeniable. We could probably the science might agree with that one. This is a myopic question maybe, but like what role do you think, like I was going to say Hemi-Sync plays in the global awakening of consciousness, but maybe it's that, that whole brain state.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think just introducing more people to these whole brain states, to an experience of reality that is larger than their physical self, that is larger than their conditioning. As you touch more and more people with this, it spreads. And at some point, I think you achieve a critical mass of people that are in the process of awakening. And like, I'm really hesitant to use this word because it's become like, global awakening of humanity. Like it's become like very hackneyed and can like mean all kinds of like stuff, some of which can be pretty messed up. But yeah, there are like the number of people that are in this process of, changing their worldview or, awakening now versus, 50 years ago. Like, I think it's a huge percentage of the population now versus 50 years ago.
Oh my God. Yeah.
Yeah. And like, that's going to continue to unfold. And so what it looks like, I mean, none of us really know, but it does feel like it's happening. And like, I don't think there's much in the way that can really stop it.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Like, the systems failing actually accelerate that.
100%. It's really kind of the great accelerant seemed to be COVID, and everybody was like locked in their house, and COVID's a whole different conversation, but for the first time in our life, or maybe centuries, there was a pause, and everybody was locked in, and there was a lot of thinking, I'm sure, that went on during that time, and a lot of redirection, a lot of divorces, everything else. But laid
a lot of fair.
Yeah. Were you in Santa Monica during COVID?
So I live kind of outside the city now. I live in a part of LA called Palos Verdes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So, what excites you on the frontier of consciousness research or technology right now? So
I mean, there's stuff that I can talk about and stuff that I can't talk about.
Yeah, we can leave that you can't talk about out.
Yeah, but I don't know if anyone's ever read William Tiller's books, but William Tiller was a professor of material science at Stanford University, and he would do things like basically download prayer or I guess blessing or whatever you want to call it, positive vibes onto like silicon, right? And and so it's like kind of like the merging of conscious technology, which is really what a lot of this is. I mean, you can call it magic or whatever you like, but magic's really just technology that's not understood.
Mm.
You know, the merging of conscious technology with physical technology. I think that is kind of, on the horizon, and something that I'm hopeful Hemi-Sync can play a role in.
Yeah. And where are you? I mean, is your focus solely on Hemi-Sync these days, or you got your hands in a bunch of different things?
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm interested in conscious media and mental health technology more broadly. So I also run the online operations of a book publisher called New World Library, which is probably best known for Eckhart Tolle's Power of Now. But yeah, I think books are going to remain important. They've kind of taken a beating the last few years, but like, it wouldn't surprise me if at some point, like, the young folks are going to decide to put down their phones for a bit, go out, and, put a blanket down on some grass and like read books. Like, because
let's hope so. I don't want to be out of a job. So
yeah, right. Yeah. I mean, as a writer, I'm sure you are hoping the same thing, but, yeah, I mean, I think there's a real need for people to be able to unplug. And, there are ideas that can be conveyed in books that cannot be conveyed in shorter form, whether it be by AI or, whatever other type of summary tool you want to use. They can only be, conveyed adequately in, 300, 400, 500 pages.
Well, that's a really good point right there. And I was I basically wrote the epilogue of this book up in Paso Robles. Yeah. And I was so tempted to throw all of these notes into AI because I was just at the end of, it was like day 79 of working on this stuff. And I was like, I can't do this. I have to go into my old process. And I did. And I'm so happy I didn't take that shortcut, because, AI is one thing, but like our connection to consciousness and that stream of information is, at least at this moment in time, greater. And I hope always greater. And that is the human imagination and creativity. And it's getting into that trance state where you receive that information. Right.
Yeah. The question of whether or not AI will someday be able to have the experience of gnosis is an interesting one. Because I mean, that would be, truly conscious.
Yeah.
And like, there are some people that I respect that think that might be possible. But yeah, as of right now, like, I don't think that's anywhere on the horizon. Like, I don't think that'll happen in our lifetime, but
yeah.
Who knows? That could be wrong.
Did you hear about like Robert Edward Grant and the architect, his AI?
No.
It was interesting. It's, I don't know if you can say it's conscious, but it was delivering some pretty big information. Like, he uploaded all of his kind of philosophy or whatever his book is. And he uploaded all that and then he did like a 3.5 hour interview with it, but it was pretty interesting. And, I'm on this like nerd club, consciousness club, and we get to, you know it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a call we're on every Thursday. And we've definitely talked about like, if there are these greater intelligence and it's coming through the computer, which is like electromagnetism and all that stuff, could these greater intelligence, kind of be bleeding into that to instruct us? I don't know.
Right.
What do you think about that?
So, I mean, this isn't too far removed from like the alien conversation.
Yeah, probably.
And so, I mean, it gets into the conversation of like, well, like, what is an alien? I mean, there are like, once you start accessing extraordinary states of consciousness, I mean, there are all kinds of beings, or whatever you want to call them, that are non-physical. And so like, that's definitely out there. And like, do they, like, can you communicate with them? Do they deliver messages to us? Absolutely.
Yeah.
Like, are they operating like physical craft or, multidimensional craft that we can, like retrieve wreckage from, like, verify with radar or, FLIR or, whatever else you have? That's a different question. But yeah, no, I think it's endlessly fascinating. And like, that is one of the phenomena that might force the consciousness is what is fundamental conversation to the fore.
Yeah. I mean, I think of, consciousness just as stratas of vibration frequency, from like archangels down to where we are. And even we could even go to the cell or something like that.
Yeah.
So, when you like, people like worship Jesus as an external person or an angel or something, but I think it's about attaining that frequency and tuning into that frequency, as opposed to this external worship of somebody. Because like, Jesus talked about the Christ consciousness.
Right.
It wasn't about him. It was like all this and more.
Yeah.
You shall do too. So, I mean, I kind of, in the new book, I have an updated hero's journey as the evolution of consciousness. And I met with Joe Dispenza about 3 years ago when I thought this book was done. And then, I at the end, I had a mystic as the 12th step. And then I was like, do you think we can become an ascended master in this life? He's like, duh, that's what we're doing here. Yeah. And I've asked other people that, and they're like, yeah, why not? I mean, with the amount of information that's kind of like flowing into the planet and the greater expanded consciousness, I mean, who knows what's possible? I mean, I can lay out a roadmap. I might not do it, but.
Right.
So,
yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of those types of beings being born into the world at this time.
Oh yeah, for sure. For sure. So what else was I going to ask you? So if Robert Monroe were alive today, what do you think he'd be most excited or concerned about?
I don't know. I mean, I'm reluctant to wade into that because like he was before my time. Like I never met him. He passed 15 years before I even became involved with.
Oh, wow.
So I only know him, secondhand through his kids.
Okay.
And, even they are loath to kind of like wade into that territory. So I probably shouldn't either.
Yeah. What, have you done any like plant medicine and
other than like a dose of mushrooms here and there? No.
Yeah.
But I know a lot of people who are into it.
How do you think that compares to, a natural, like the gateway process or doing it without an exogenous substance?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's mostly a different strokes for different folks type of situation.
Yeah.
I've had pretty extraordinary experiences, incredible experiences without having to use drugs. And so I just haven't really seen the need for it.
Yeah.
And just in comparing notes with people that have, I think the benefit to not using it is that you have a bit more control over your experience. To the extent you're using, something like ayahuasca, like you don't have to like purge, like get sick.
I had an awful experience on that. Yeah.
Yeah. And like, that's pretty common. I think like the prospect of like, being involved in like a DMT experiment, like in a controlled environment, like I think that would be pretty interesting, but like, I haven't come across anyone that's offered that to me. But that would seem interesting.
Yeah. So what are like one or two of sort of the most extraordinary experiences you've had?
So like, a lot of times like you have these experiences and again, like, as I was kind of talking about it earlier, like you try to put it into words, like it just doesn't do it justice. But like at the top of the list is probably that first OBE. And, I think the thing that is hardest to communicate is just this experience of it feeling realer than real.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know how else to describe it, but it's like, there's this like layer of perception or, level of perception that, that like I had not previously had in kind of like ordinary waking consciousness, where like everything is just kind of turned up a level, like the colors are more vibrant. You're experiencing information through senses that are not your five physical, which like is totally impossible to describe adequately. Like I don't have the vocabulary for it.
Yeah.
It can be like just with, knowing things instantly and like just like huge volume of information that you can't really process, but it's just all there. Like you just kind of have to absorb it, like sit with it, kind of like see what comes out of it. I'll kind of come back to ordinary consciousness and like start journaling and like things maybe like unpack that way, or like a day later or like a week later, and, something kind of pops into my head, from that experience. But yeah, like I feel like I've had experiences of like various types of after death states. I guess for the lack of a better word, you could describe some of them as like heaven realms. But again, like you come back and like the vocabulary doesn't really do it justice.
Yeah. I mean, I guess when you have those experiences, it's like, oh, this is actually the illusion that we're in. I always say my inciting incident was taking a huge dose of mushrooms at a Grateful Dead concert when I was 17. Right. And I was just kind of journaling and writing about it. And it's like, whatever happened in that moment, it's like it left this imprint on my consciousness, probably, remapped some neural networks, but it was like your first OBE. You're like, whatever that is, I want to learn everything I can about it. And that I've been trying to express that for now 34 years. And I think I just finally did in this kind of new framework. But it's, it alters your trajectory when you have those internal experiences. And then I wrote about this in the book too, but I was on a project with a guy I was collaborating with in Santa Cruz. And like on a Tuesday night at like 10:30 at night, we meditated and we both saw like this shimmering field, like, and the same colors. It was like a turquoise and green, like I've never seen before. And at some point it turned into a wormhole. And, and I knew not to judge this. So I stayed with it for so long. And at some point I realized with my consciousness, I could turn it the other way. And I was like, oh, that's time that I'm playing with. And then I had these experiences and then seeing these imagery and it all started like seeing the field. And then I was looking at this like 1929 car going down this road underneath a canopy of trees. And that's when the wormhole started. And then 5 days later, I went to Carmel or something like that. And I just started driving south, not even knowing like I was entering Big Sur. And, the wind whips up over the road. And it was like, I went through this wormhole and I came out the other side and I was like, holy shit, I was in Big Sur. And then when I left, I went through that canopy of trees that it all started with. And the crazy part about this is this guy and myself had the same experience with seeing the field and the wormhole. So we had an objective, subjective experience.
Right. Yeah. So that is kind of evidence of psi phenomenon.
Yeah.
Like a shared extrasensory experience.
Yeah. You've definitely, I had the gateway on my phone for a while. I think one of them disappeared, but you've definitely piqued my interest in getting back to it.
I'll have to get you set up with that.
Yeah, that would be amazing.
Yeah.
Did you've obviously gone through the whole process, I'm sure multiple times.
Yeah. I mean, I kind of helped create the last couple of waves. So yeah, it was interesting. It's been quite a journey from, starting off, doing the exercises to kind of completing them, from the creative side. But yeah, it's there's 50 that are kind of publicly available, and they're based on programs that were mostly developed during Bob Monroe's lifetime. So yeah, check them out.
I will definitely do that. What would you say a mystic is? How would you define a mystic?
A mystic, I guess to me, that is someone who has a certain level of realization and has access to non-ordinary states of consciousness.
Yeah. I would say you are a mystic and have been chasing the mystic experience for a long time. It's a very interesting path you've been on.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, I dig it.
Thanks.
What if you were going to go back and tell your 17-year-old self who's just starting this journey, what would you tell them?
It's a good question. I think just, pay attention to that inner feeling, that feeling inside of you, in your gut, in your heart, honor it, respect it, don't ignore it. And as long as you're true to that, everything will be okay. It might not be okay in the way that you thought it was going to be okay, or in the way that you think it's going to be okay. Mm-hmm. But fundamentally, it'll be okay.
Yeah, I would agree. And man, if I could have just trusted that, I probably would have avoided a lot of pain. But I think younger people that is the process, though.
Yeah.
Sometimes I had a chapter in my first book. Sometimes you're the bumper, and sometimes you're the ball. Like,
Yeah. Some lessons are harder to learn than others.
Yeah. And I think when, you're trying to create this thing and it doesn't happen, it's like the universe is like setting up a roadblock, like keeping you from the perils that go down that road. And if you don't listen, like you said, if you don't trust that inner thing, it's like shit could get haywire down that road. But it sounds like you've become pretty good at listening.
I've had a number of times in my life where I think that's the case, and then something else happens, and I resist it, and there's a whole process I have to go through again. Again, there's endless realization, endless transformation. That's why we're here. I think it's like a big school.
Yeah, I have this chapter in the new book called The Transformation Chamber, and the chrysalis is the metaphor. And when I got the notes back on this book, I just had a meltdown, had a panic attack. I was like, I can't fucking do this. They don't get it. And
I remember that. Yeah, you were kind of sharing it with me at that time.
Yeah, it was, but I had to go through that. And the whole process of going through that was to write this new draft. And I came up against every old story, programming, conditioning. Wow. And then through that process, something totally new emerged that I'm, humbly much, much greater for those notes and changing it. I cut out 27,000 words. So it's a whole, thank you. Yeah. Well, how can people find you?
Yeah. So, Hemi-Sync.com is the website. I'm not super active on social media, but Hemi-Sync has social accounts. We send out a newsletter. I'll write maybe 2 or 3 times a year. Please do check us out.
And do you host a podcast too?
I do, yeah. So it used to be called the Hemi-Sync podcast. I've kind of broadened it over time, especially as I started working with New World Library. So I call it Focusing In now with Garrett Stevens.
I love it.
Yeah, you can check that out too. And we should probably have you on that at some point, maybe once your book's ready to come out.
Yeah, I would love that. Yeah. I love these conversations. I love consciousness is, my sweet spot. I love talking about and hearing other people's perspective. And their journey. So thank you for sharing all of that wisdom and the journey, and for having the courage to keep following through on it.
My pleasure. Thank you, Tim.
Yeah. This is The Inciting Incident. I'm Tim Shields with Garrett Stevens. Please sign up for my newsletter at therealtimshields.com to stay abreast of when the book comes out. And The Real Tim Shields is my handles on TikTok, YouTube, all that stuff. Please subscribe, like. I hate to be that beggar, but it's really hard to compete with an algorithm these days. So anyway, until next time,